What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with NIO, Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what the news is saying about NIO and the overall market, what you should be watching for tomorrow, as we have the PPI data coming out and initial jobless claims. But before I do anything like this, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just about 1 day. It ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with NIO. NIO tanked 4.73% for the day because we had some bad news that came out. It gapped down with the CPI data that ended up getting a small little push before continuing to sink, just like the market temporarily, before the market tried to rebound, but NIO did not really rebound with the market. So the question is, why is NIO sinking like this? What news came out? There's this big piece of news that came out that the EU is launching an investigation into the Chinese EV makers. They're going to be looking into many makers such as Xpeng, Li Auto, and NIO. They're going to be looking into the pricing and competition of the foreign manufacturers. They're going to be looking at the current tariffs as they're continuing to flood China. And this, once again, is just bad news for them as we're starting to see more and more trade tensions between China and other companies. Now, this is very important because when this happens, this is leading to tensions and not really the best of news for companies like NIO. There's more and more talk about NIO getting, these issues hurting the companies, the issues limiting trades, and the list goes on. This is not good news whatsoever. And with this potentially happening with these tensions, once again, guys, this is part of why NIO ended up dropping. Now, despite that, we also had some good news that came out. NIO has actually joined a venture. It has a joint venture with S-Volt or this other company, and that's going to be very, very good for their batteries, as they're going to be able to get larger batteries that could be used for much longer periods of time. Now, this is coming out. This is going to help them improve their battery systems manufacturing. It's going to help them recruit more and more assistants, and it's going to help them continue to grow as time goes on. Now, this is some great news for them. There's been some talk about how NIO could have been struggling with the development of their larger batteries, but as of right now, we're not really seeing that. We don't really know that for sure, and whether or not that's the truth, we're going to be looking at some new optimistic news as NIO has this joint deal, which could be a lot better for them. Now, they have a team of about 400 in place to research, develop, and scale battery manufacturing. And some are saying that this deal that they're making is going to help them improve something that they could be like slowing down in. So we're going to be waiting to see how this helps them as time goes on. But so far, would consider this a very good piece of news. Now, when it comes to NIO, there's also this talk right here. NIO is letting us know that it's very important for us to look at their ET5, which is very popular and continuing to grow. I can't wait for what the future holds for that. So that's the news for NIO. When it comes to the market for tomorrow, just as a reminder, we had CPI that came out today. CPI year over year was a little bit hotter than expected, just by a tiny little smudge, very, very tiny bit hot. It was 3.7% versus the 3.6% expectation. Core CPI was as expected at 4.3%. And then besides that, everything else is pretty close to expectations. Core CPI month over month was a tiny bit hot at 0.3% versus 0.2%. But besides that, everything else was as expected. So that's very, very important to note. CPI was as expected, if not a tiny bit higher on some metrics. And that in turn was not really that bad for the markets. The market continued to hold up because the market was looking at the fact that the Fed will likely not really change their policies as a result of this reading. Now, moving forward, going into tomorrow, we have the PPI report coming out and core PPI. This is like CPI from the producer side, so we're going to find out more details about that tomorrow, 1 hour before the market opens. PPI tends to be a leading indicator for CPI, so make sure you're prepared and see how this affects the markets. I also want to add that we have initial jobless claims coming out. That's going to be very impactful for the markets, and we will see what that causes. Now, as far as NIO goes, we have about 36 million in volume, so it dropped on low volume. It wasn't anything too aggressive, and the short volume did decrease a little bit despite that. Now, looking at some new ratings, everything's basically the same as before. Price-price ratio is kind of flat because NIO is not really heavily outperforming or underperforming. There was one day where NIO was outperforming, the next day it's underperforming, going back and forth and back and forth. Thursdays tend to be green about 50% of the time, so it's a coin flip. And finally, there's not much else going on with it. So when it comes to the market, I just want to mention that NIO is down about 4.73%. Will NIO bounce or not? I think it's going to depend on PPI. The PPI report is going to be more impactful for that matter. Also, any pieces of news, but for now, we're just going to be focusing on PPI. If we get a decent PPI, so PPI is going to be the producer price index, by the way. We want core to be 2.3% or less, and we want the overall PPI to be about 1.3% according to this. If it's harder than expected, this could cause NIO to end up dropping below $10 because that's the critical support and retesting 9.9. If the PPI report is as expected, if we get an as expected PPI, we could see NIO trying to bounce and retest 10.29. And then don't forget about the fact that the news is another external factor. We'll see how that affects NIO. But for now, it looks like it's at support, and then it's going to react to what the PPI tells us. A hot PPI is high. If inflation is high tomorrow, uh, we could see SPY end up gapping down and retesting 444. If we get a low CPI PPI, and inflation is looking quite decent, that's once again a leading indicator for CPI. That's what PPI is. Then we could see SPY start pushing higher. Now, my guts tells me it's going to try to push higher because of the VIX. If I just pull up the VIX, I actually have it somewhere here. I think it's up here. The VIX is very, very telling. It's going to give us more information about what the market could end up doing because on the 4-hour time frame, we have this gap down here, which might get filled soon. The VIX is looking weaker. So if the VIX does come down to fill this gap, that could be a good sign for the market potentially push higher. So that's where I'm leaning now. A decent PPI would push Tesla towards 275 to 278, and bad data is going to cause Tesla to drop all the way down to 268 to 266. As of right now, it's trying to hold up, so there's a good chance it's going to try to hold these levels. Looking at Apple, it's looking more bearish overall. However, it looks like it's underperforming because we have this head and shoulders that has developed. This may lead to more downside, so look for a potential like inverse cup and house, maybe a small bounce before it drops, or it could drop towards 171. That could slow the market down, but it may take a little bit longer with all this data coming out. So even if the market does bounce a bit, even if Apple bounces just a tiny bit, it could be forming an inverse cup and handle. And the inverse cup and handle would be just like this end right here for the right shoulder. And later on, we could see some more downside for the markets, right? There's always that possibility. For the QQQ, if we get some good data tomorrow, we're going to be watching it push towards 378. Bad data is going to cause it to sink towards 370. For Nvda, it's starting to show some signs of life as we have some nice IPOs coming out in the chip market. We have a potential bullish divergence, so there's a good chance it could be forming either like an inverse head and shoulders or try to uptrend. So watch it range between this 452 zone, the 200 EMA, about 462 for a bit if we are about to form like this right inverse head and shoulder. And it could start to uptrend a little bit, maybe trade sideways and try to uptrend if that ends up being the case. There's a possible sign of market strength in this, but for now, it looks like it's going to range trade for a bit before potentially breaking out. If it can hold above 462, then that's a sign of strength. Then it's going to likely try to head towards this imbalance around 460. Actually, not the imbalance. Sorry, guys. This gap around 470. If it manages to hold above 462, that's going to be the level to watch for. But for now, we're just watching range trade and we'll see what happens from there. So with that said, for NIO, I think NIO is going to react just like how the market does. It is looking more bearish from a technical standpoint on the 4-hour time frame. So there's an increased probability of us retesting 9.9, but no promises, guys, because it depends on the data and PPI and other factors like that. So that's going to be the biggest factor an hour before the market opens. If we get a decent PPI, we could be watching NIO trying to rebound towards 10.25. If we get some bad data, we're going to see NIO sink towards 9.9 or even below that. Okay, so it depends on the data. NIO is looking weak from a technical standpoint, but technicals are not everything. The data matters more tomorrow morning, and we'll just have to wait for that. All right, so thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow once the data is all out and everything is situated. Thank you, and peace out.